back to ASCC, right? Students are paying for the books, and the way that the existing contract is, although we're in the final phases of negotiating, renegotiating for the the next agreement with them, the student government gets $300,000 coming back guaranteed, and that is coming from some of that margin. So the issue, we're in the middle of negotiations, and I would say that the $300,000 minimum guarantee that Talon has been paying for several years, plus an additional $50,000, which basically covers utility costs and so on, going to our facilities department, that is going to improve based on the existing negotiations right now. So I guess the issue becomes, if they can't charge margin on books, that means there's no money left over for them potentially to stay in business or to send money back to ASCC. So we're doing everything we can to make sure that we negotiate with them to make sure more money comes to ASCC directly through that process.
I'm a little confused. For example, again, Book of Science went to Pearson Publishing. We got them to reduce what I would call the retail or the wholesale price. So if we negotiated a $10 decrease from the publisher, and that same book is going to Follett, and they're charging the same amount as the year before, to me, I'm kind of confused what that has to do, with all due respect, what I just heard.
So Follett buys the books from the publisher that you just negotiated, correct?
Correct.
Let's say that's the same price. You negotiated the price. Follett has 900 stores nationwide. I assume that they're going to negotiate a better price than you've negotiated, or they're at least going to have that price matched. Do you know how that works? I'm asking.
Well, I just know that Pearson we have a custom book that's only sold here at Cerritos.
Right. So what happens is Follett has to make money. It would be like going to a Macy's department store. If you negotiate and Macy's sells everything at cost, Macy's isn't going to be there for you to come buy things from in the future. And the same thing with the bookstore.
So there's no need for me to negotiate with the publisher. Because that's what we've been asked to do, because Follett's going to charge whatever they have to charge, because they're a corporation, they have to make money. So the idea of me negotiating with the publisher to reduce their costs is benefiting Follett, not my students.
Well, Follett does not benefit in that Follett has a margin of 26%. So assuming that you're getting, I don't run that bookstore. It's not my business. I don't understand all the issues of it, all the nuances of it, etc. But I'm going to make this assumption for the sake of this discussion. You negotiate a lower price. So Pearson has a $100 book. They sell for $100. You negotiate to get it at $90. I'm going to make the assumption that Follett gets to buy that book at $90 now because you negotiated that. So Follett's margin is 25%. They're going to make their margin, but the price, 25%, when you do the calculation on $90 versus $100, the textbook price is going to be lower for the student. So the margin stays at 25% or 26%. They're not making more money through your negotiations. That cost is being passed along to the student. But the issue is, they still have to add margin to it for their business to be able to stay in business, and also because of the negotiations to pass some of the money back to the students.
Well, one question. When I talked to Pearson, they explained the idea of margin. They said one of the aspects of margin is books being returned back to the publisher that weren't sold, right? But then Pearson also related to my department, that they have never had books returned. So in a weird way, Follett is charging the student. They're having the cost of shipping books back that haven't been purchased, passing that to the students, yet Follett has never actually shipped books back. So from my point of view, what is the district doing to ensure that Follett is keeping their end of the bargain so that we can have cheaper textbooks for our students? I'm going to do my bit. I'm going to go and talk to publishers to reduce their costs. What is the district doing with Follett to make sure that, that you can get the best deal possible for our students?
Well, I think the issue is Follett has 900 bookstore campuses across the country, and they have great buying power with publishers, all publishers, including Pearson. And we certainly have a contract with them that dictates they can't charge more margin than we have settled in the contract, and that contract is similar to other bookstore contracts and so on. So we're doing all of those things from that side, in addition to the negotiations that we're in right now, getting a better deal than the last contract based on how the bookstore business has changed, because In this particular bookstore, all of that money, the way the current contract reads, 10% of sales up to $3 million comes back to ASCC. This is, and over $3 million in sales, that's all their sales, not just new textbooks, is 11%. So the issue is, our students in ASCC get a large amount of money from the college bookstore, and other colleges don't do that. This is a very unique situation that ASCC gets a lot of money flowing to them through our food services and through the bookstore that wouldn't happen in other cases. And the issue, I think, what you're maybe alluding to is, well, do we have cheaper prices and ASCC not get money, but textbooks are cheaper? I mean, that's an issue that has to be looked at. So it's a balancing act between those two issues. And so the district is looking at contractual issues of how we can hold their feet to the fire as much as possible. Now, some of the questions that you're asking, because I don't run a college bookstore, I have high-level overview over the bookstore and the contract issues and so on. Mondo, or a followed employee, certainly can answer those questions better than I can, and he wasn't able to make it today. So.
Okay, we have Dr. Namala, and then I believe a student is Kimberly. Is that correct? Who raised their hand back there? Yeah. Talia. And then we have Mary Ellen, Abraham, and Doug. Oh, he answered your question? Okay, Dr. Namala, Solomon?
Yeah. Maybe I'll give you a specific example. We have two textbooks. One, we have negotiated with the publisher in Econ. They sell it to the bookstore at 130, and the bookstore turns around and sells it to the retail price for students at 190, 150. That's a gross margin of 61.50 and gross profit margin of 47.3%. That's a violation of the contract, just as what you have said, 25%. Another textbook for which we will use in spring for $70, we have negotiated down from 100 to 70. Follett will sell it for 104.25. Gross margin of 34.25. Gross margin as a percent is 48.9%. Again, a violation of what you just.
So if you give me those numbers,
Yeah.
I'll do my calculations. I'll look into that. I mean, this is a team effort. I would say this: there are some examples, and again, I don't run the college bookstore, but for instance, there's a landed cost, so the freight charge for some of those products gets added. So there might be a little small. It shouldn't go from 25% to 40%, but there's a little extra there. And also, my understanding is on list price. There's some textbooks that have a list price actually printed on the text itself. They have to be sold for that price, so regardless of what the negotiation is, that's by contract with the book publisher. So there are some nuances that I'm not intimately familiar with that might apply in those situations, but I'll be happy to look into it if you give me the information.
There are several examples. Would you like all of those?
Yeah, give me the examples. We'll
Thank you.
look at it.
The problem I found was I did look at the contract. The contract, which was signed on March 29th, 2010, clearly says that on new textbooks that the gross profit margin should be 26% on net price books.
Right.
But it was amended later on, August 16th of that very year, where it allows all these other things, that freight and the penalties, restocking fees and return penalties, all that to be included. So I don't know why it was allowed. So there is that's a big loophole for them to add on all these charges, and then they can get away with these margins. And I don't know why that contract was amended 5 months later on.
Did I sign that contract?
Yes.
I don't recall that particular amendment. I'll look at that. But, I'll look at that.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, yeah, I'm just wondering, you keep saying about profit margin 26%, and kind of Dr. Namala kind of asked a little bit about that question. I mean, is it stipulated what kind of expenses they can capitalize down to us? Because if I create a building, I mean, accounting-wise, I'm allowed to put all kind of expenses and capitalize them to get that building up to code, to operate to the final extent. But there's a margin, even within GAAP, within FRSB, of what can be capitalized. But are you guys putting something in the contract that specifically restricts FLED from putting extra expenses on us that shouldn't be incurred by us, but are part of their operating expenses, which we shouldn't be incurring just because they have 900 million or 100 account stores, that's expense that they should incur on their own for being in business, not trickle down to us.
Excellent point, that margin is only on textbooks. So none of the issues you mentioned are allowed on the margin, so it's only on textbooks. And that 26% is new textbooks only.
So it's stipulated on the contract?
Yes,
also?
correct, it is.
Abraham?
Why isn't administration considering to subsidize textbooks? For example, using the vintage fund and paying 30% of a textbook to make it more affordable for students, therefore increasing student success?
Well, I don't know, that's a board of trustee decision in the end. I think there have been some of those discussions.
Dar?
I just kind of feel like Terrence's question still wasn't answered. If a book costs $100 and he negotiates down to $90 and they're charging 26% on the 100 or the 90, it should still be cheaper. And the problem is it's not. He negotiates and then the price still stays exactly the same.
No,
So that either means they're marking over 26%. It doesn't make any sense.
No, I said that it would be cheaper for the student, but the margin would still be the same. So
Right, but it's not cheaper for the students is what he's saying.
That's the experience we have in our department, is the price didn't go down one bit.
No, I would, based on the example, the price should go down. Now, there might be other issues that I'm not familiar with, but based on the example, the price should go down. Pearson still has their margin. That's a legitimate thing, but the price still should go down if they're getting, if $90 is passed on to them, the price to the student should go down. Just
So,
based on that pure
My
example.
question then is, what is the district doing to ensure Follett? I mean, who's auditing them, is my question, to be honest with you, because they have these contract obligations. Is anyone from the district checking in on them periodically to make sure that they're keeping their end of the bargain? Because if the answer is no,
Right.
then there's a problem.
Well, I have talked to them about auditing, and we haven't done any audits the last few years, but certainly we're happy to do that. When I get this information, that's why I asked for the information, we'll look into that. And it's not a problem, their books are open, it's not a big deal to audit, but again, the process just has to happen, so.
Just piggybacking on my colleagues, Terrence's question. This is probably not for you, Dr. Fatah, because you're not a Follett employee. I wish a Follett employee was here. I get confused between margin and markups. Like Terrence mentioned, we have a textbook at $81.75, and there is a markup of 47%. Which of those 47% is a markup, and which one is the margin?
So let me, on a technical basis, my understanding, I've been in retail, know a little bit about retail. A margin has to do with a set percentage that you add on to the cost that you paid for the book. So the cost, if it was $100, 25%, you do a reverse division. I didn't bring my margin calculator with me, so that's a margin. A markup or a markdown is you're either marking the price up or you're marking the price down. So for instance, on the beverage or potato chips over there, as an example, they have markdowns all the time, or on sweatshirts and so on. They have markdowns all the time. They want to get inventory out. They do have markdowns on textbooks. They get a call from corporate, and for whatever reason, they say, listen, these books aren't being used across the system or whatever. We need to mark them down, so which means they're going to take less of a margin, because if they paid a cost, they're going to mark them down, they're going to actually earn less of a margin. Contract-wise, they cannot earn more of a margin. Now, my understanding is sometimes they have markups because the publisher has passed, it's very volatile pricing, my understanding, like gasoline almost, which changes every day sometimes by a few cents or sometimes 10 or 15 cents. So a markup, what happens is when the publisher when Follett gets a new batch of books, and they're paying a higher price than they did 2 weeks ago when they ordered the last batch or whatever, which could be a managerial type of issue. Then they have to mark it up, but their margin remains the same at this 25%. So on a markup situation, it would be the cost is we're having to pay a higher cost. We're going to keep our margin at 25 or 26% or whatever it is based on the contract, and therefore there's a markup. That's my understanding, but you're right. Follett would be better